welcome everyone. I'm very excited to have you here for Financial Benefits of Effective Infrastructure Management. And welcome to Dan Kaup and Daniel Randolph, who will be doing most of the presenting today. So let's just go ahead and get going. Here's the team that will be presenting today, as I mentioned. I'm Ruth Kersey, Senior Project Manager at Elevate, a nonprofit dedicated to making sure everyone has access to clean and affordable heat, cooling, power, and water. It's a big lift, but we're trying, in their homes and in their communities. And I'm also the project manager for Cook County TAP, and my background is in public health. And for much of my career, I've been dedicated to reducing lead exposure, especially in children. So like I said, my background's in public health. And environmental health for children is near and dear to my heart. So I know a lot of you have been here before, so welcome back to the attendees, a few new faces or new names that I see. So hopefully we give you all the information you need here today. So I'm pleased to be joined by Dan Kaup, Deputy Village Manager and Director of Public Works for the Village of Wheeling, and Daniel Randolph, Assistant Director for Engineering and Public Works for the Village of Schaumberg. And I was lucky enough to hear this presentation at the 2025 Illinois Municipal League Conference and thought our audience would get a lot out of their insights into the value of programmatic and data-driven approaches to infrastructure management as we implement lead service line replacement plans across Cook County. So welcome to Cook County TAP, Dan and Daniel. We're really looking forward to your presentation. A quick reminder is that we have registered this webinar with the Illinois EPA for an hour of water operator RTC, and professional engineers can also apply to their respective professional organizations for the continuing education credits as well. And we'll be sending out the code and the instructions post-event. So look for that email. So here's an overview of today's agenda. We'll start with a brief update on Cook County TAP. And like I said, I know a lot of you have been here before, so we'll keep it brief, but we do have some some great information and a new funding opportunity to share with you. And then I'll throw it over to Dan and Daniel for their presentation. And this webinar is scheduled to end around 11:15. We don't have to stay on the whole time, but we wanted to make sure that folks had plenty of time to ask questions. And please submit any questions you have to the questions pop-up at the bottom of your screen or your toolbar in Zoom. Or if you want to, I can unmute you at the end. Just raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your questions live. Okay, so let's start checking in with Cook County TAP real quick, I promise. I know that I say this every time during these presentations, so I want to make it brief. So what is Cook County TAP? Cook County TAP is a resource hub designed to accelerate healthier water in Cook County communities. It's free technical assistance with the aim of helping municipalities develop lead service line replacement programs and implement water affordability best practices. We provide the resources you need to create affordable and effective initiatives that reduce lead in drinking water and decrease residential water costs, hopefully. From starting a program and securing funding to encouraging participation from your residents. The result is intended to be a well-designed program that will improve the health and well-being of your community. It's funded by Cook County using American Rescue Plan Act funds and administered by Elevate. So Cook County TAP regularly updates our website. That's our primary resource for providing information, posting and sending news, our website, and we post and send newsworthy and timely information on LSLR and affordability, as well as continuing to engage the Cook County community. Currently, we are developing resident outreach templates and we'll be sharing those on our website soon. And don't forget to sign up for our new From the TAP newsletter. It's really only comes out about once every other month. We put it out sort of as needed, so you won't be overwhelmed by the newsletter. And you can do so from our homepage at cookcountytap.org. And you'll find a roundup of important news and available resources with each edition. Here's a recent example of some of the types of information on our website. If you go there, this is our resources page, but there's additional drop-down menus, etc., for more information. So this is where you'll find the outreach templates that I will be developing, and they'll be posted there soon. Here's what I really wanted to get to. I'm excited to announce a new funding opportunity from the Cook County Water Affordability Program, also managed by Elevate and funded through the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development. It provides up to $245,000 per municipality to develop and/or implement projects to tackle water affordability challenges. All municipalities delivering water to residential customers within suburban Cook County, so that's excluding Chicago, are eligible to apply. And projects funded by this program should support residents disproportionately impacted by unaffordable water bills. And the example of projects include cost of service and water rate studies, leak alert and billing system upgrades, and customer outreach and engagement efforts. And just so you know, we are having a webinar tomorrow. You can, do the QR code there, and you can link to the registration page, and you'll get all the details there. It's a pretty quick turnaround. The due date for an application is December 9th, 2025. So hopefully you have a bunch of time in the next couple of weeks to get that done. And if you want additional information, you can't attend the event. I'm sure we'll record it and try to get it posted as quickly as possible. But you can always reach out to CC Water Affordability at elevatenp.org to get additional questions answered. One more quick shout out, Lead Care Cook County. This is our program for taking out lead service lines for childcare facilities. If you click on that QR code, you'll go to their website and get more information there. But this is, again, funded through ARPA, and it ends in 2026. And we really are looking for about another 100 or so childcares to remove their lead service lines for free. And so if you have any childcares in your community that you know have lead service lines, please reach out to Lead Care Cook County .org, and they can get you hooked up with getting those service lines removed. And there is our information, so Cook County Tap at elevatenp.org, or you can always go to our website, cookcountytap.org.
All right, me this up.
That's it. Perfect.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you, Ruth. I appreciate it. As Ruth mentioned, my name is Dan Kaup, and I'm joined by Dan Randolph. I'm the Deputy Village Manager and Director of Public Works for the Village of Wheeling, and I've been in that role for going on 5 years right now. Dan is currently the Deputy Director of Public Works for the Village of Schaumberg, but he's shortly going to be changing his title and organization. He's going to be the Director of Public Works for the City of Naperville. Congratulations to Dan. And we have, we share, he and I, membership in an organization of the American Public Works Association, and specifically on the Asset Management Committee, which was formed in 2020. I was the inaugural chairperson for that committee, and Dan is the current chairperson for the Asset Management Committee. We both share an interest in prioritizing organization of maintenance and operations, as well as replacement programming for asset and infrastructure maintenance. And as Ruth mentioned, we had recently presented at the Illinois Municipal League conference in Chicago. So this is kind of a furtherance and another iteration of that. Specifically, as we saw in the survey, all of you are asset managers for water infrastructure utilities, or as a village or city engineer. So we thought that in your interest of pursuing funding for the TAP program through Cook County for lead service line replacement, this would be a good intersection to discuss asset management principles and practices on a larger scale. I will be doing the intro to that whole programmatic approach, and Dan will be sharing real-world applications as well as examples of how efficient use of these principles can save agencies and utilities money in the long term. Both of us work for boards and managers who, like many of you, are interested in ensuring that the money that is allocated for infrastructure management is spent appropriately. Since we have an obligation to meet the expectations of these elected officials for providing a level of service that they desire, the manner in which we manage these funds is probably the largest variable in how much it actually costs overall to give them what they want. If we do it well, it costs less to manage a set of infrastructure. But if we do not do it well, it costs more. So within the profession, good infrastructure managers have employed several programmatic policies utilizing asset management software solutions to ensure that the expenditure of infrastructure money is done efficiently. That is what we're going to be talking about today. For many of these programs, especially the software that serves as the backbone of infrastructure management plans, it can be very expensive, which then presents the challenge of demonstrating the value of spending so much money on what could seem to be a superfluous expenditure. For the record, neither Dan or myself are stumping for any one product or process, but we'll be talking about software applications to help with asset management. We both use different products. He uses CityWorks in Schaumberg. I use Cartograph, or now OpenGov here in Wheeling. We're here to highlight that there is a value to programmatically approaching a data-driven manner to infrastructure management, with the goal of spending as little as possible while providing the level of service that our elected boards desire. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll be using infrastructure management and asset management interchangeably. Asset management is a term that more broadly includes equipment and vehicles, but also focuses heavily on maintenance costs. These can be in-house labor or contractual support services, as well as capital replacement and construction. So the bullet points there are, what is asset management? What is infrastructure management? It's a commitment to constant interaction with all infrastructure. It's a defendable way of prioritizing projects and resources when you're going through your budgeting process. And then it's planning for what will be needed and how you're going to pay for it. So if I was going to summarize my presentation by one slide, this would be it. The components of asset management. If you as a utility manager are able to understand and implement the core components, these core components of what asset management is, you'll be on your way to promoting the best practices of implementing asset management and being more efficient in the manner in which you provide your services. The first one is asset inventory. The inventory should be containing as much as possible as far as information, while also considering the context for which it can be used. An asset is anything that you can apply cost or time management structure to. Oftentimes, utilities and agencies will use mapping systems or spatial data. That can be key to locating and cataloging your assets. Asset details or attribute data can help you know what you have. The second component is the condition assessment. Once you know what you have, an inspection will help you determine its age, its relative performance metrics, and how it degrades over time. These data sets can boil down to a definable metric that will be used to assign an index score. It could be a 0 to 100 or 1 to 5 stars or whatever you choose, which will help you make decisions because you'll understand how well that asset is performing and whether or not it's meeting your level of service. The third is operations and maintenance practices. This is what you do to take care of your assets and how those practices impact the asset's value and performance and degradation. Often we know that performing a task routinely helps something function better. So the more you interact with your assets, the better you understand what condition they're in. The next component is life cycle cost analysis. This is the financial component. In financial terms, this is the depreciation of your asset over time. From a daily application point of view, we understand that while the value may be decreasing, so does the performance. So When is the correct time to inject capital, such as maintenance, operation, or contracted services into the asset to get the most out of its useful life. And then you have the long-term funding strategy. This is where all of the previously collected data boils up into a capital improvement plan or a pro forma or a funding mechanism. These funding strategies must span the average life of the asset to fully capture how to sustain maintenance in perpetuity. So level of service. This slide shows two ways that you can consider capital planning. It's important to include elected officials in setting level of service expectations. So what do I mean by level of service? I mean the average condition of a given asset, be it roads or water mains in the instance of what we're looking at today. The common way of building your capital improvement plan is that first bullet point, the budget first approach, which is more reactive. Typically, we first identify how much money we have to spend. So they'll, your village manager, your utility executive director will tell you that this is what your budget is for a given project or service, and then you build a draft plan from that dollar amount. This results in a service level that may not be what is desired by the community or by you as a utility manager. A better way of building a capital plan is to identify first the level of service that you are intending to provide. This is the proactive approach, where you decide what condition your infrastructure should be in, and what is your failure mode. How bad can a set of water mains in a distribution system get before you replace it? By setting a level of service first, you are able to plan for the costs associated with replacing a number of miles of pipe to keep up with your level of service, and then you can plan accordingly. Without a proactive asset management program, what we're left with is replacing infrastructure at the point of failure, which is never the intended process. This leads to inaccurate capital improvement plans that have a lot more capital for your first year, and then the amount of planned projects decreases in every successive year that you look out from next year in your 5-year or 10-year CIP. We've all seen these CIPs. Year one will have $10 million in projects, and then year two will have 8.5. And by the time you get to year 5, you've got $1 million of identified projects. You know that you're going to be doing a lot more work than that 5 years out, but you just haven't identified what projects those are. Infrastructure management helps you to spend most of your time maintaining your infrastructure because of your ability to collect and leverage data spatially on your mapping GIS related to your assets. So you know what needs to be replaced and when, based on consistently updated condition assessments. I think most managers find that using a software application allows you to better differentiate between depreciation, which is essentially guessing how long an asset will last, versus the more dynamic and accurate understanding of what degradation is, which reflects the actual condition. So these are the two visual ways of considering the difference of the two. The left visual is a straight line depreciation. This is how your finance department typically will degrade the value of an asset. If you have an asset that is, in this instance, it's a $4,000 asset that is going to last 5 years, it reduces in value by $800 or 20% per year. But we know that that's not how things degrade. What happens is the asset starts out nice and strong and starts to degrade. Then we inject some sort of maintenance plan, maintenance program. If it's a road, maybe your crack sealing, which rebounds the overall condition index of that asset, and then it degrades again. Maybe then after a certain number of years, we do a patching program, which returns some of its residual life until it fails, and then we replace it. But as long as we're interacting regularly with these assets, we have a better understanding of what the actual condition is and what the actual remaining life is, so that we can actually more accurately plan for the replacement of these degrading assets. And there's a real dollar value to this. Using infrastructure management software is a transparent way that you can demonstrate through reporting why your assets and your resources are needed. This saves money through efficiency. If you're replacing water mains on average of every 75 years, if that's a very robust goal, but you're able to by maintenance make that last an extra 5 years. That's a real savings that you'll see in reduction in replacement costs. Modeling. Yeah, this type of approach is important to positive asset management and is only available with asset management software. Modeling as a concept is only a few years old in asset management software packages, but I think will become more prevalent in the coming years. What is it? It allows you to hypothetically build case scenarios of different financing levels to model what in real time you can expect as an infrastructure manager. So if I have a $1 million a year program for replacement of pipes, I know that I can expect this level of service. If I increase it by 5%, my overall network can increase as well. Modeling is an opportunity to build accurate CIPs, and it offers choices based on cost and desired level of service. This is really beneficial, I think, in pavements, but can be applied to any set of infrastructure assets. One of the things that you're going to be able to identify with that is being able to show elected officials in real numbers what the effect of their budget decisions will have on their water systems and facilities and everything else. So, asset management software is not inexpensive. There are significant program costs, including the startup costs, depending on the size of your agency. And then, of course, you have your software maintenance. Usually they have software suites where you can build based on your desire to either have more of a robust program or more of a basic or lean and mean application for the software. And then, of course, you have the additional costs of tablets for your staff and cellular service and whatever else. So what do I get for my money? What's my ROI on implementing a program like this through a software application? Your return on investment comes, I think, in multiple forms. Asset management software offers a defendable way to prioritize projects with your available resources because, it gives you the ability to continually track the condition of your assets. You have a better understanding of when your assets will fail and will be able to be scheduled for replacement at the optimal time. Instead of using a traditional life cycle for a given piece of equipment or infrastructure, as many organizations do, you'll be able to know the actual condition of each truck or of each segment of pipe, and will be able to replace them more appropriately when needed, rather than blindly replacing them on a predetermined schedule. This allows an organization to maximize the useful life of each asset, resulting in a more efficient use of resources. The software also allows you to track how you spend your labor resources, resulting in an understanding of what programs actually cost. The overall purpose of the software tools gives you the decision-making ability to become more efficient, is really what it comes down to. And this efficiency reduces the number of resources needed to provide a level of service expectation that your community or your elected officials have. I'm going to turn it over to Dan Randolph now, who is going to describe for you numerous examples of how this approach can save you money in the real world.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Uh, Glad to be here to be able to present two case studies to you. Thanks for the opportunity, to talk to everybody. I think that at least one of these case studies is going to be very relevant to your work. The first case study will be about buildings, particularly building replacement, and how we used asset management principles to prioritize a building replacement program and then sell that giant price tag to the village board. And the second case study will be how we tested out new technology, well, new to me at least, to reduce our water loss and what the cost savings were on that. And there's a lot of asset management principles in that case study as well. So a little bit about me. I'm currently working for the village of Schaumberg. Schaumburg has a good history of asset management. We were the winners of the first National APWA Asset Management Award, uh, and that was largely based on our use of our asset management program to drive operational efficiencies. So you're just going to see just a touch of that here today, but most of the stuff I'm going to present to you does not involve CityWorks or our asset management program. The principles should translate well into your own program. A little bit about Schaumburg. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a fairly large suburb on the northwest corner of Cook County. That is a picture of Woodfield Mall. So that's what put it on the map in the 20th century. We have roughly 200 miles of streets. It's a little bit more than that, 300 miles of water main, and a whole slew of facilities. Uh, so we'll get back to the water main in a bit, but I'm going to start with buildings. So Schaumburg owns quite a lot of facilities. We have 26 buildings with people in it, 22 separate utility buildings, 4 storage structures, 3 gazebos. So it's over 50 buildings to maintain. If we graph it out and we look at the stakeholders who are in those buildings and what's the relative size of the buildings, you get this image. And I know you can't read the text there, but those 4 large circles in the middle, that represents our baseball stadium, our public safety building, which is our police station, public works building, and then the largest one is actually an office building that the village temporarily owned, but we since demolished that. For reference, the gray medium-sized circle in the upper left-hand corner, that's our village hall. That's going to come into play here in the next few slides. So, the biggest buildings, public safety, public works, and slightly smaller village hall. When we look at our main operational facilities, this is the list. So I'll kind of walk you through these next few spreadsheets. On the left, that's the list of all the buildings. At your municipal center, that's our village hall. Public safety building, that's our police station. And then we have public works, and then all the rest of it below it. But if you look at those top 3 buildings, the village hall, the police station, and public works, the average age of those buildings is 49 years old. And this is 2021 data. So you have to add 4 years to that. So we're looking at that 3 of our main operational buildings, the average age is over 50 years old. The recognizing this, the village manager's office decided that we should start to program in building replacements into our capital improvement plan. And the reason for that is if you just were to Google what's the design life for a village hall or for a police station or for a public works building, you're going to see that the average design life for these buildings is typically no more than 50 years. Now, some of you in older suburbs maybe are working out of a village hall that's 75 years old. But I'm sure if you're working out of something that old, you can appreciate that it's time for replacement. When we think about replacing a building, you have to start with some costs. So a consultant that we used, Williams Architect, they gave us this basic cost matrix for how much it would be to replace a building. This is 2021 costs, new construction cost per square foot. And for the purposes of our preliminary design, we used the average costs. So for a police station at $600 per square foot, costs have gone up obviously since 2021, but this was our frame of reference at the time. All right, this is a busy uh, slide here, but again, just look at the top three rows: Village Hall, Public Safety, and the Public Works Building. And you can see there's a second to right column is the average cost per square foot. Those are the cost that we got from Williams Architect. And when we multiply that out by our square footage, we get our replacement value, or what's the expected expense to build a new building. So Village Hall, a new building at the time, we thought would be about 23 million dollars in 2021 dollars. That's a very, very large price tag. So large, in fact, that when we first had this discussion with our elected officials, one of the elected officials said that uh, we would not be building a new village hall as long as he was in office. Um, and that was based on his observations that the buildings were well maintained. Everything seemed clean, things seemed functional, and just on the principle of good financial conservative approach. He didn't want to spend $23 million on a new building. As a resident of Schaumberg, I appreciate that, and I think he was doing his job. But because he was standing on, somewhat firm ground, staff had to take a very comprehensive approach and figure out a way to have an intelligent discussion uh, and to be able to show the need for building replacement and how we would prioritize building replacements. So enter asset management principles. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to come up with a way to benchmark the relative condition of the facilities. We're going to use a number, so we're going to assign a numeric value to each building. We called it the Facility Condition Needs Index, FCNI, and I'm going to give you those numbers later. You can think of it as it's comparable to a pavement condition index. So it's just a number, but this way we can compare one building to another using the same sliding scale. The math of it, the FCNI, the needs index, is based on the 10-year costs. So that's repairs, replacement, and projects. So the sum of all those costs, and I'll break it down one more time in a future slide, divided by the current replacement value. The different colors on the bottom show you that um, for the sake of determining, what's a good number and what's a bad number, if your needs index is above 0.6, or the sum of the maintenance, repairs, replacement costs is 60% of the current replacement value of the building, then you should consider replacing the building. This is the same slide, except the numerator is broken out. So for each of our buildings, we're going to look at the 10-year costs recommended by a thorough assessment and our known CIP, known capital improvement projects. So this would include things like if an air handler needs to be replaced or windows need to be replaced in a building in the next 10 years. Item B is 10 years worth of EPW. That's our department, Engineering and Public Works, labor costs. So if we're going to be doing some of those projects in-house, let's say the village staff is going to be replacing a generator, so something that's beyond just normal cleaning, then we need to factor in our labor costs. And last would be costs to construct additional space to meet space needs. This is an important component of our facility condition needs index. And it really factored into the index score for Village Hall. So why might you need additional space? In our case, we had staff working in the basement of Village Hall in workstations that were so cramped together that the backs of their chairs were rubbing against each other. We had run out of storage space. People were working in the basement with no windows. It was never intended for human occupancy, and it was becoming a recruitment deterrent. People would come in, our HR was in our basement. They would go into the basement, they would see the conditions that they would be working in, and there were some people that didn't want to come work for us. So if we were to say, okay, we need to build out X number of square feet in order to have proper offices, how much would that cost? So again, when we look at our 10-year assessment, we are considering what is the cost to maintain the status quo. We're adding any operational needs for improved efficiencies. So not wants, but just what do we really need? What are our space needs? Is there a future need of the village? So for example, in our police station, we knew that they were going to have a new department, a wellness component, and so they were going to need some additional space. And that's based on the need of the village, and then any village labor costs. What we're not including in our 10-year maintenance cost is energy efficiencies, employee wellness, security, recruitment, or the image of the village. These are important things, but for the sake of making an apples to apples comparison between buildings, we did not factor any of these into our FCNI. Getting back to space needs, because this was a very important component in coming up with the true cost of Village Hall. One of the things we did is we looked at the size of our buildings and we compared it to our comparable communities. And this slide is just showing the neighboring communities. So the slide on and I have it misspelled, the far left is Schaumberg, and that's showing that our Village Hall has 396 square feet per employee. And the municipalities to the right is Hanover Park, Hoffman Estates, Elk Grove, Palatine. And the average size of their village halls are more than double the size of Schaumburg's village hall. So showing this to the village board was really eye-opening. That it's not just our perception that we're working in a cramped condition. It's backed up by data. So we did a thorough condition assessment of all of our buildings. We put values to all the maintenance costs, the space needs, public works, labor costs, and that represents the column A plus B plus C. So just looking at the top row, our municipal center, we identified over $30 million worth of work over the next 10 years. And the replacement cost of the building was estimated at 22 million. So the needs index was 1.32. So that's over double what a needs index would be to consider replacement. So the results of the study showed that we had 3 buildings, the municipal center, the public safety building, and fire station 54 that are all due for replacement. So this slide right here was the key slide that we used to convince our village board to authorize a design contract for Village Hall. And this was how we prioritized it. We said, look, Village Hall is the one in the most need, so we should start there. The board agreed. We issued a design contract. We decided to do a demolition and replace the Village Hall in the current location. We started demo beginning of this year, and we are currently erecting the steel, and that is scheduled to be finished this month. And Village Hall will be completely finished and moved in by Thanksgiving next year. So just for those of you curious about how good our cost estimate was to current prices, our cost estimate there was $22.8 million. That was in 2021 dollars, and that was to replace the building at its existing size. But our design, the building grew a little bit. It's now a 2-story building with a slightly larger footprint, and obviously there's some factors across the nation that are causing pretty substantial escalation in building costs. And so we're looking at total cost for design, contract, construction, administration, and the new construction and demolition came in at just under $50 million, which actually the board is pretty happy about. So this was a good example of using sound asset management principles to sell the board on a new idea and to make sure that we were making data-driven decisions. So moving on to water loss, I think this is going to be an example that most of you should be able to relate to. I'm going to cover the water loss history for the village of Schaumberg and then describe a pilot program that we went through to determine how best to identify the sources of our leaks and to combat our water loss. And for the sake of this presentation, I'm using the term water loss. You might use the term non-revenue water. It's really just the difference between the water purchased and the water sold. So I'm not gonna get too much into the weeds on the exact numbers of that loss. You can have water loss from inaccurate meters, from theft, from unmetered irrigation, and that all is part of this water loss. But again, for the sake of this presentation, I'm looking mostly just at the leaky pipes. So this slide is showing our water main breaks and our water loss by year on the same graph. I'll give you it really tells a story. So I'm gonna walk you through it, and I want you to think about it for a second. So on the left axis is the number of water main breaks. So our main breaks starting in 2014 is about 35. It reached a low of 30 in 2017, and then it starts to jump up. And by 2021, we had 70 main breaks. The red line is the water loss. And so again, we hit a low point in 2017 that was under 10%. And by 2021, we are at 16% water loss. So there's obviously a correlation here. Uh, there may or may not be a causation. I graphed this out after the fact. Uh, so I now have the benefit of hindsight of looking at it and seeing how clearly the two are correlated. But at the time, in that 2019, 2020 era, we didn't really know exactly what was happening and why we were getting so much water loss. Uh, but now we have a pretty good indication. There's a white block on the right-hand side. I'm blocking off what happened in 2022 and 2023 because there'll be a big reveal at the end. I'll show you how successful our pilot program was. This slide is exactly the same slide, but I've also overlaid in green the amount of money that we spent on preventive water leak detection. So this is hiring a company to come in with headphones and a monitor. You put it on the pipe, you listen for leaks, you identify the source of the leaks, and then you go and you replace those leaks. Prior to 2017, we were spending $16,000. That's not a lot of money for 300 miles of water main, but we weren't doing the whole village. We were doing about half of the village, 50%. And in 2017, so it's uh, before my time in Schaumburg, the decision was made to reduce that expense, that budget line, down to $7,000. I'm not really sure why that decision was made, but I think it was because they saw a decreasing trend in water loss and main breaks. As you can see, before 2017, the number is going slightly down. And so somebody, and I don't mean to cast shade, again, they didn't have the benefit of hindsight, but somebody thought that saving $9,000 was a good decision. But right after that, we see the uptick, a very, very dramatic increase in water main breaks and water loss. When we tried to identify the source of the water loss, we first mapped out our water main breaks. So this image, the blue is all of the water mains in the village of Schaumberg, and those small red X's is the location of all the main breaks. And I think this was a like 3 years of data, so between 2018 and 2021. Um, and there's a couple things when we look at this. Number one is first is that Schaumburg has a pretty good uh, asset inventory. We know the location of all of our water mains. We also have good records on operations and maintenance. So we know the location of all of our main breaks. If I'm in my asset management program, I can click on those X's and I can see how much each of those repairs cost us. We can filter, sort, aggregate data. We can analyze it all sorts of which ways. But the other takeaway of this map is that our main breaks are fairly well distributed. There is kind of an upper left-hand corner down to the lower right-hand. There's kind of a swath of main breaks. That is the older part of town. The very north part of town and the very south part of town are less residential, a little bit more commercial and industrial, and a little bit newer. So it tracks. This is a map that we would expect to see. But there was no smoking gun here. It wasn't like there was just one area where we could go in and do a large water main replacement program. So our village manager's office wanted us to look at all the technologies on the market and come up with a program to identify the source of the water loss. Um, he didn't want us to, so now this is in 2021. He didn't want us just to hire M.E. Simpson or whatever company and do an old-fashioned village-wide leak survey. Um, and I think he was, challenging us to make sure that we knew what was available. So we came up with a three-pronged approach to our pilot program. The first was an aerial-based leak detection technology, so using satellite radar. Uh, the second was semi-permanent acoustic sensors in our high priority areas. So this is sensors that go on fire hydrants. And last was our control group, which would be the village-wide leak survey. So satellite-based radar, synthetic aperture radar, it still seems like voodoo to me, but the satellite sends out radar, and depending on how it scatters, it can tell what it's looking at. And one thing it can actually do is it can look at groundwater and it can determine if that groundwater is chlorinated or not. It can tell the difference between stormwater and water from water mains. So we did this village-wide. It has several pros. You get a snapshot of the entire village at one time. It can look into fields and places where you might have water main, but you don't have valves or hydrants. So places where it's hard to leak detect or acoustic sound. Places that maybe your staff isn't driving around or pedestrians aren't walking. So if you have a leak in a in a field, it could pick that up. But this is really more effective in rural communities with a very large geographic footprint. We found that it wasn't super effective for Schaumburg, and I have the numbers, some of the data in a future slide. The cons are that it is somewhat expensive. You're paying a company to fly a satellite over your town. You only get a snapshot at one time, so you need to have multiple flyovers so that way you can see if things are changing. Um, and then you still need to go out and correlate. So if the satellite picks up that there's a potential leak in a field, you still need to go out and verify and identify exactly where that leak is. The second technology we tried was this semi-permanent acoustic leak detection. So you see numbers 1 and 2, you place two sensors. The sensors are mounted to the hydrants. We use sensors that kind of blended in with the hydrant. We didn't want to look like there was something expensive on a hydrant and have to worry about theft. Um, the sensor's connected to a transmitter, and uh, the the benefit of this is you can leave this sensor in place and it can listen to your system both during the day and at night. And because it can listen throughout different amounts of water use, it really can paint an accurate picture of exactly where you're leaking. This was incredibly effective. We found leaks. So even though we were only trying to listen to our water mains and hydrants, we found leaks inside residents' homes. Um, it is a very, very powerful tool. Um, Unfortunately, it was really expensive. Uh, the there's upfront equipment costs. You either have to buy or rent these sensors. People have to go out, have to install the sensors, and there's some management on the back end. So I would encourage any community that's really struggling with identifying where the leaks are to consider this, but just know that it is very, very expensive. And last, our control group was manual leak detection. So some of you might have done this yourself at some point, right? There's a person, he's putting a sensor. You need to touch uh, the water network and you just listen. All right, so what did we find? So in this program, we had 3 different groupings. 2 of them were leak surveys. So in the right column, you'll see, I'm sorry, one of them is leak survey, but we had 2 different companies doing the leak survey. We had Water Services and Emmy Simpson. And the reason for this is just because we had one contractor already contracted to turn valves and leak detect at the same time. So then that was Emmy Simpson, and then Water Services, we had them uh, do a leak survey of the balance of our water network. The 2 columns on the left represent the newer technologies. So we hired Emmy Simpson to put on these acoustic semi-permanent sensors. I believe we used a Mueller product. Um, and we did a fairly small portion of the village, just 23 miles of main. Um, and the second to left column is the satellite radar. The company we used was Astera. Uh, we did the entire village. The most important part of this slide is the bottom, the cost per leak. So again, in order to come up with an apples to apples comparison, I know this isn't perfect because not every leak is made the same, but the the how much it cost us to find one leak using the semi-permanent sensors was over $33,000. Uh, the radar was over 7,000, and good old-fashioned leak survey was under $1,000 each. So as it turns out, this is a case where the old-fashioned method was the most cost-effective. So then we looked at what is our anticipated return on investment if we do a leak survey, either half of the village or the whole village every year, or should we do it twice annually, 3 times annually? And this was a table I came up with. So I forecasted that we would save the most amount of money by doing a village-wide leak survey once a year. So we presented this to the village manager's office. He said, okay. So that's what we moved forward with, was increasing our maintenance budget in order to leak survey the entire village once a year. You'll recognize this slide from before. After we leak detected the entire village, the water loss came down almost immediately. And I think what's important here is that there is a correlation, but I think there's also somewhat of a causation between the two. The more water main, obviously the more water main breaks you have, the higher your water loss is going to be. But if you're leak detecting proactively and you're finding leaks while they're small, you have an opportunity to fix them before they turn into big water main breaks. And the green is our maintenance cost. So yes, we had to increase our budget to $42,000 for the village-wide leak survey, but that difference in water loss, that difference between 16% and 10%, that represents a savings of roughly $1 million of village water. Uh, So we're saving a lot of money by spending a little bit on maintenance. And that wraps up my portion of the presentation. And want to
Fantastic.
open it
Perfect
up
timing.
to Q&A.
I wanted to allow people to ask some questions. First of all, thank you, Dan and Daniel and Dan, for the great presentations. Um, the we are moving into this part of Cook County TAP is affordability, and that program is ramping up. So it's really great to have the example of leak detection and how much money that can actually save a community, which also translates into saving residents money as well. I'm assuming, actually, that's maybe a question. Does that translate into savings for residents when you do save money for the village?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it reduces the cost of the operating cost for the utility, whether it's them buying water or producing water, whether they pass that on to the resident, but it does reduce the cost of the operating cost, overhead cost for the utility.
Yeah, that's great. Daniel, did you want to?
Yeah, we've used our asset management program on all of our assets, and we've seen a huge reduction in costs overall when you look at the effect it has on the capital improvement plan and also on long-term operations and maintenance budget. So whether this applies to forestry, we've seen big savings on our street program, and we've increased the PCI of our street network. We've seen it in facilities, and the other interesting thing is the more data we show and share with the board, the more they approve us to hire additional staff and to keep things at a higher service level because they can see a direct correlation between the work we put in and the services that we're providing.
Right, so that data driven and then meeting the expectations, given what you thought would happen, I think is really important. Getting back to the buildings too, and um, the idea, I know you didn't include community perception or I forget what the term was that you used, but sort of like the profile of the community and how
Yeah.
it's represented when you're replacing buildings. You didn't include that in your factors for whether to make the decision or not. But I think and tell me if I'm wrong, but when communities see a new village hall being built, they feel like, they're in a good community, right? So have you gotten any feedback on that from the residents now that you've broken ground on creating a new village hall? And yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
the Schaumberg is a fairly conservative village when it comes to finances, and I think that's shared with the residents and with the elected officials. Um, and so some of the more vocal residents were voicing their opinion on the side of do we need a village hall and why are we spending all this money? When maybe I'm not making a lot of money and I'm paying taxes and what's this going to? Uh, but I think what was really important about the work we did and the presentations we made to the village board is that when the village board received that feedback, potentially critical feedback from the residents, they were very, very confident in their response to the residents and businesses that this was necessary and it was in the best interest of the village.
Right. Again, making that data-driven argument, that's really great. And then Dan, a little bit of a question for you on software. So both of you have been in the business for a while. And I know that software is, every year, it's like leaps and bounds moving forward. But how important has it been for you to use the software tools available to create these plans and dashboards, et cetera? So
Yeah, sure. The software is a tool, like any tool, depending on how well it's used is I think the more important factor rather than which one you choose. The nice thing about any of the softwares available right now is that it ties all of the work associated with any given asset to the maintenance costs, as well as an understanding of what condition everything is in. So it's very important. We've been able to um, tie in our responsibility for locating Utilities. So we all have as a responsibility of being public works managers, Julie responsibilities, 811 responsibilities, and Cartograph offers to tie in the ticket that comes in from Julie to our work software, our work management software, OpenGov. And so we can both assign the work, complete the work, and then create an electronic record, which meets the criteria of the new law that's coming in on January 1st for our operations. We also use it for inspections, creating uh, inspections cycles, and once those inspections are closed out, once the work order is closed out, it automatically creates a new one. So if you're going to be inspecting a given asset every month, it will generate a new one. It helps you with not having to remember everything. From a condition perspective, it automatically tracks the condition of any given asset. And while you can use something as simple as an Access, Microsoft Access form, or even Excel, having a more robust software certainly makes your life easier, especially when you have a number of different assets or a larger utility.
Great, thank you. So I'll give one more shout out to the audience for questions. Please feel free to, you can put them in the chat too, but usually they ask to have them put in the Q&A. And if there are no others, I'll just wrap it up here by saying, first of all, thank you to our guest speakers. We really appreciate you, Daniel and Dan, for coming in today and doing this. Really important information, as again, asset management is so important. And now we have the lead service line replacement on top of everything else you guys have to do, which clearly is a lot. So I appreciate you guys coming in and doing that. Just to remind my audience here, go to cookcountytap.org, check out our events page for our affordability grant offering webinar. Register for that webinar for tomorrow and find out how you can maybe do something like Daniel did. That's essentially what they're going to help you figure out, is how to address your water losses and create more affordable systems. So again, everyone, thank you for coming. Thanks to the attendees, and hope to see you here again soon. Take care, Dan.
Thank you, Ruth.